So on my right, sitting down, is Timothy Karr. He's Senior Director of Strategy at the Free Press Association. He builds on free press, grassroots and policy work to advance goals and reach new communities. Before joining the Free Press, he served as Executive Director of MediaChannel.org and was Vice President of Global Vision New Media. He's worked extensively as an editor, reporter and photojournalist. And he reports on media and media policy for Huffington Post and on his personal blog, MediaCitizen.org. Joining us on Skype will be Reem Al Masri. She is the Internet Research Lead Program at Khyber, a Jordan-based media organization that explores regional and local issues in internet governance, digital rights and freedom of expression. And she's currently mapping IG in Jordan, leading research on privacy and surveillance in Jordan. She's got an MA in Communication, Culture and Technology from Georgetown University in Washington. And then we have Ellery Biddle, who's just on my right, editor of Global Voices Advocacy. The project for Global Voices online citizen media network provides free expression and privacy online by reporting on challenges, victories, and emerging trends in internet rights around the world. She's a fellow at Berkman Centre for Internet and Society at Harvard Law School, and she's got a master's degree from the Centre for Latin American Studies at the University of Chicago, where she's become an expert in the politics and policies of internet use in Cuba, which I was hearing something about the other night. I didn't realize that they had their own completely closed system. Well, there's more things we can talk about there. So I'm hoping that you can give sort of 5 minutes snapshot each. Reem, I think you're there. We'll come to you third, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So, Timothy.
Yeah, actually, I'll start. Yeah. Thank you all for being here on such a beautiful day. I would actually welcome you to come closer if you'd like. It would be great towards the end if we can just open it up to discussion. So please feel welcome to come up.
Come down to the front row.
Yeah. So I wanted to start out by just talking a little bit about censorship on the web, broadly speaking. I'm sure, as many of you know, censorship online takes many different forms, from the kind of political censorship that you often hear about around social uprisings, most recently in, Ukraine and Turkey, the Middle East and North Africa. There's often a lot of censorship around religious imagery and speech. But then here in the UK, you guys have these new filters that are intended to keep pornography out of the computers of young people, but in the end, that it appears that policy is leading to a lot of censorship of perfectly legal and not pornographic material. In the United States, we have what some people think of as corporate censorship of copyrighted material. So there's a lot of different ways that it takes shape, and it can happen both in a technical sense, where a government or a company orders the blocking of or physically blocks information from coming through the network. It can also take the form of prosecution or arrest or some kind of extra legal harassment. So today, let's see. I wish I could see.
You can see.
Oh, I can see there. Okay, sorry. So what I wanted to talk about today is a case that I've been working on for the last few months, which is, if we could bring up the first slide.
I think you've got the clicker.
Oh, I do it, sorry. Okay, so.
And it's quite bright on there, so don't worry, that's dark.
No problem, that's great. So these 6 friends of mine are all bloggers in Ethiopia. All people who live in Addis Ababa, who have advanced degrees in the sciences and in journalism. And in 2012, they started a blogging collective. They were interested in writing about social and political issues, which is something that is not done very much in Ethiopia. The media, traditional media there, is very controlled by the state. And so the internet, many people have seen as a way that you can have some kind of different kind of dialogue, a more critical debate about what is happening politically. So that's what they decided to do as a group. And here's their blog, which you can't really see because the Amharic characters don't come through here. Anyway. So they were doing this for about 2 years, and in addition to writing, they actually started holding little events. In Ethiopia, only about 2% of the population has internet access. So you'd think like, well, why would you blog at all? They were interested in connecting with people in other parts of the world to talk about these issues, but they also held sort of live events because they wanted to actually talk with the public. And they started talking about the Constitution. Their country actually has a pretty sort of decent by human rights standards constitution, but what they pointed out again and again was that the government didn't seem to be following it. So they did this for about 2 years, and then they were all arrested on April 25th, along with 3 other journalists, and they were held in prison for 11 weeks without charges, and then they were charged with terrorism. Charged under the Terrorism Act, Ethiopia, that was written in 2009, actually with the support and guidance from the United States government. Ethiopia is located between Somalia and Sudan, 2 countries where the threat of extremist groups, terrorists, whatever you want to call them, of really extreme violence is big, and where governments like the United States and actually the UK have put a lot of resources into providing arms, military training, and aid to try to bolster security in these countries. And Ethiopia is kind of, it has this interesting kind of power position in the Horn of Africa. But it also has an incredibly corrupt government that engages in all kinds of human rights violations. And these friends of ours were trying to point that out to the public. But the government is in a wonderful position to say, no, you're trying to overthrow us. And they fabricated some link to groups that they have accused of terrorism in the past. I mean, the Committee to Protect Journalists is considered a terrorist organization in Ethiopia. So now they're in jail, and this is actually a piece of writing that one of the bloggers, Befikadu, who he's a very prolific writer and wrote for us for a long time before being jailed, but he actually managed to smuggle this piece out. And I think it's very poignant because he was asked by his interrogator, so what do you think is your crime? And this is what all of them have been asked again and again. And his point in this piece is, he says, since they couldn't figure out what our supposed crime was or what law we were suspected of violating, we were asked again and again, so what do you think is your crime? So I sort of put this case to you guys, and I'll just go through. There are a couple more. I mean, there's been some very interesting activism around this, and strangely enough, John Kerry had met Nat Nile, one of the other bloggers, a couple of years prior to this happening. So you see this tweet that somebody sent out with a picture of them together. It's just an incredibly sort of strange and bizarre situation. There are many people around the world trying to lend support. We did this campaign on Tumblr where people could send in an image of themselves holding up a sign. And there's actually this really nice vigil in Washington, D.C.
And weren't these bloggers, I mean, the group were on Facebook, weren't they? Is that right?
They were also using Facebook. They had their own blog on a blogspot.
Right. And so I mean, was the use of social technology something where the government gave themselves permission to spy and then to come up with a way of using the material that they had to accuse them of terrorism? I mean, was it a straightforward spying and then the US government being complicit with the Ethiopian government?
Well, so actually, they were very transparent and public about what they were doing, so they didn't need to spy on them. Though they have this 19 pages of charges, and the charges range from trying to incite unrest publicly, trying to incite unrest through social media. But then they also they have since gone through many of their online accounts. They went to their homes and took their computers, mobile phones, and so there's been quite a lot of surveillance that is part of this. But they actually, yeah, because this group, I mean, they're promoting the Constitution. So they don't think there's anything wrong with what
And where does
they're
that
doing.
cross over with the United States being, as you suggest, kind of complicit in this situation?
Well, the United States and UK governments give a lot of monetary and military support to Ethiopia because of its unique position in the region. And we have lobbied to various entities in the US government to say, can you please try to intervene? Because this is a huge violation of human rights. And it also inspires other governments in the region to behave similarly. And the response from the State Department is, yes, we would love to, but it's ultimately the Department of Defense that is in the power seat, and that their priorities,
So is this almost
Don't.
like anybody who is theoretically a terrorist, whoever names them as such, is swept up into a great basket called possible terrorists, which means that just the word, whoever gives it you, means that the US state government kind of go, well, it's possible. Is that the sort of...
It's a brilliant little weapon. I mean, it's sort of, and I think since 9/11, we've had this sort of shift in which if you bring that idea into the conversation or into the political space, it shuts it down.
Okay, and gives license for any kind of censorship.
Any means necessary.
Right. Timothy, can I pass over to you?
Sure, thank you. And I just wanted to add to that, since 9/11, there has been a lot of new legislation written in the United States. The Patriot Act is one that most people talk about, but within that legislation is often language that's very vague by intention, that gives the U.S. government opens a loophole through which the constitutional rights that we think we have as citizens can be violated. And so that's one of the issues that Ellery and my organization work on are a lot of the policy structures that need to be put in place. And that mostly affects the United States, but it also has ramifications globally. But I want to segue some, and I think this is actually a very good example from the presentation that I'm going to give is this, I think for a lot of people in the United States, where I come from, I would imagine there are very few people there who actually know that this is going on in Ethiopia. And that's a problem, and it's a problem that we as advocates struggle with all the time. Is there are horrible things going on, not only in your own country, but certainly around the world. How do you get people to care, and to care enough to affect change of some way? So my name is Tim Karr. I am the Senior Director of Strategy for Free Press. Free Press is a US-based policy and advocacy organization that fights for everyone's right to connect and communicate. And oops, I need the clicker. And for us, that concept really breaks down to two areas. One is this sort of idea of universal access to open networks that includes working on issues like net neutrality and addressing the digital divide. But we're also looking at, once you get people online, once you get people on open networks, how do you make sure that they know what to do and how to protect themselves and how to protect their rights? So we also work on media literacy and protecting user rights issues. And one of the issues that we have been working on in the United States, and this is where the segue begins, is an issue of net neutrality. I don't know, does everybody in this audience know what net neutrality is? A show of hands? Good. You are more than the average. And the net neutrality in the United States has become a very contentious issue, especially this year, because we have our lead regulatory body, the Federal Communications Commission, making a decision on net neutrality. We've done a lot of activism and organizing around that. This is an event that we held in New York City about 2 weeks ago outside City Hall. There have been millions of people who have been making comments in the docket there, and then there has been a very active industry lobby fighting net neutrality. And an example of that is a letter that was sent to the Department of Commerce by a list of tech companies objecting to rules in the United States that would protect net neutrality. And so I took a look at this list of tech companies to figure out where their vested interests lie. And a lot of them are in the business of selling to US phone and cable companies the technology that they would need to violate net neutrality, technology that allows them to sniff your packets, to sniff the data packets, open them up, figure out what kind of communications you're making, and then manage that data in a way that they would want. Now, this is a type of technology that's often called dual-use technology. Sometimes it can be used for legitimate purposes to make sure that networks run smoothly, but it can also be used in the wrong hands to surveil, filter, block online content. And this list of companies that was supporting an anti-net neutrality movement on this letter to the Department of Commerce includes Alcatel-Lucent, and they are in the business of selling this technology not only in the United States but globally. One of their products is called the Lucent 1357 ULIS. It adds, and this is from their own materials, it adds lawful interception functions to Alcatel-Lucent products, adapting their internal interfaces to the standard lawful interception interfaces of law enforcement agencies' monitoring facilities. Now, if any of you are copywriters and want a job for any of these companies, I'm sure you could probably do a better job of writing than this. But nonetheless, what they are selling is called lawful intercept technology. This same company is now, went out this year on a delegation to Iran, which has a deplorable track record. The Revolutionary Guard in Iran actually has a controlling stake in the national telecommunications company. Alcatel-Lucent is in Iran trying to sell this very same technology. Nokia Siemens was also on this letter in the United States opposing net neutrality. From their own brochure, Nokia Siemens Network Monitoring Center can be used for intercepting communications in public fixed and mobile circuit switched networks, next generation networks, and the internet. So this joint venture has also been selling similar technology to Bahrain to aid in their interrogation and torture of human rights activists. Also on the list.
You need to click the thing.
Sorry. I'm advancing my own slides here. I apologize. Also on the list, because I can't read from here, is Sandvine. Sandvine is a technology company based in Canada that sells what's called deep packet inspection technology. Deep packet inspection technology allows, it sits on the routers in an internet network, and it allows the internet service provider to open up the packets of information that travel over the internet and see what the content is and decide what to do with it. Sandvine is one of the biggest DPI providers in the United States, and some of the incidents that we've had of net neutrality violations were done by companies like Comcast using Sandvine technology. But Sandvine is also very active in the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, and Thailand, and it lists them as customers and celebrates these businesses in their press releases. These countries are also known for blocking LGBT content, religious content, sexual health resources, political content that's critical of those in power, and resources designed to help individuals protect their privacy and circumvent web blocking. And last, there are many more, is Cisco Systems, also signed on, opposing net neutrality. Cisco Systems is very active in China. One of the products that was marketing to China was called Golden Shield. During a Cisco presentation to the Chinese government, it said their technology could be used to stop the network-related crimes, guarantee the security and services of public networks, combat Falun Gong, evil religion, and other hostilities. So Cisco has not only working with the Chinese government in that regard, they also help with the Chinese video surveillance network. China has more surveillance videos, publicly located surveillance videos in operation than any other country in the world. And a lot of that technology is being managed using Cisco technology.
So Tim, are you basically saying that if you just took a snapshot in America, that the idea of web neutrality is being opposed by companies in a country that is often speaking about the lack of civil rights in other countries, but those companies based in the States are actually perpetrating the lack of civil rights?
Yes.
And presumably, you're not the only person who knows this, are you? I mean,
no, I'm not. And unfortunately,
the government must know this.
And I imagine there are some people here who have followed this as well. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can do about it, and then one of the things that is being done is a naming and shaming of these companies, and it's being done both by advocacy organizations. Privacy International is based here in London, is very good at it, but also Bloomberg, The Guardian, Reuters, the Wall Street Journal have written about this.
But what I mean is, you're not the only person who knows about it. Yes, The Guardian will out it. Yes, Bloomberg will out it. But the United States government knows about it.
The United
Canadian government knows about it.
Yes.
So how do they square the outpouring of, attitude about Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, et cetera, with the fact that they know very well that they're actually housing the companies, and in fact they're American companies? They
are very slow moving, and there's also split opinions within government itself. There is an initiative by the State Department to try to address this more thoroughly, and they're working with the Department of Commerce, which has the Bureau of Industry and Security, on drafting new trade sanctions that takes a deeper look at this dual-use technology. The problem that they have often is a problem of definition, because a lot of this technology can be used for legitimate policing purposes. A lot of it can be used for businesses who just want to better manage their networks. And you have to figure out how it's being used at the end. You have to also look at the countries into which you're selling this technology, and there are a number of efforts to kind of index countries by their human rights records and decide whether their record is so deplorable that you can no longer allow that business to proceed.
But do you think there's any knowing schizophrenia going on, whereby they think, look, on the one hand, we don't like what's happening in Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, if they were able to show us methods by which they were surveilling their own citizens, which could be useful to us in the end, and actually some of those terrorists might be terrorists that we're concerned about, then in a sense we'll take whatever we get. Do you think there's elements of that?
I think there's an element. I think Ellery pointed it to some extent with the conflicts of interest in Ethiopia, and so yes. But there is a large part of the role for public education and advocacy in this to elevate the issue to a way where politicians in the United States or in the countries where these businesses exist feel that there is enough political pressure outside of their usual channels in the general public that they have to act on this. At the moment, people don't really know, the general public in the United States don't really know that this is happening.
I would also add that companies like Cisco are an interesting example because they aren't really public facing. They aren't like Google or Facebook where everybody uses it, and when this news comes out saying, oh, as it turns out, this company gave this citizen's information to their government and now they've just gotten arrested. Like that doesn't happen with companies that provide this kind of technology,
right.
And it makes it much harder to turn it into a public issue.
Yes.
There's Reem, yay.
Okay,
a consumer-based strategy is difficult. There is an initiative called the Digital Rights Index that's being created by Rebecca McKinnon, who's been a real leader in this space, that will rank companies by their human rights records, and hopefully that will become a useful tool.
I mean, throughout all of these things, I'm always saying to all of us, if you suddenly know something you didn't know before...
I'm sorry, Jake, I didn't get the last thing.
Oh, I think she's talking to the...
if you know something that you didn't know before and you think, well, maybe I should do something about that, don't leave it to people who are called activists. I mean, we all need to raise these issues up just because we're citizens. Citizens need to be active, is one way to put it. Can I come to Reem? Reem, hi, I can see you there. Al Masri, hi, Reem. I've already introduced you, and there you are in Jordan. And I'm sorry that you're not with us. I know that there was a kind of visa issue, nothing suspicious, just bureaucracy. But nevertheless, there you are. Welcome.
It's okay. We can consider it as one other form of censorship. So we're circumventing that now.
Yes. So could you just pick us up, Reem, on your experience in Jordan on this whole territory of censorship?
Well, just to give some kind of an overview of the platform that I help running, and also I'm the internet research lead of this independent media platform of this Hiber.com, and then later it's .org, later it's .net, and then it's .me. So that will give you some kind of an idea on the status of censorship in Jordan in general. It was one of the first countries in the Arab region that asked its publishing websites, especially online publishing websites, to get licensed before they're permissible to be accessed. So in June 2013, 300 websites got blocked in addition to Hiber for not getting a license or a permission to publish online from the likes of a department or press department. So this came as part of new amendments that tried to contain websites under the definition of a publication and apply the same restrictive rules that are applied on offline publications, newspapers, magazines, on electronic websites. So not only as a website, we stood and still stand against having to get a permission to be able to publish online in a time in like the 21st century, but also we cannot obtain that license given the vicious circles of licensing conditions through these laws that have been implemented on us. So one of the conditions is for the editor-in-chief of any electronic websites that publishes or news or analysis. So you can also be a blog, that you don't have to be an established news or media outlet. If you provide analysis, whether it's a video or whether it's any kind of reporting on any event, and if they think that you need to get licensed, you will eventually get blocked until you get that license. And you need to be a member of the Jordan Press Syndicate in order for the editor-in-chief to be a member of the Jordan Press Syndicate in order to get that license. And that even implies a whole set of other rules. Like, for example, you have to have 4 years of memberships in the Jordan Press Syndicate in order to be able to get that license.
Wow.
So it's really vicious. While the government tries to keep the rhetoric of that this is only, your block is only part of like not following the procedural legislative kind of law, and the law has to go or to be implemented the same way on everyone and nobody's above the law. But at the same time, we cannot even abide by the law in order to be able to be accessed in Jordan, because that condition do not apply to us as just a few young Jordanians 7 years ago who did not really have a degree in journalism, who wanted to just start a publishing website, and were really successful. And now we feel that the government is actually extending its mentality of censorship to the internet. So it's not that it's something new, but it feels that they're only realizing the threat of the internet as a medium to mobilizing and to voice dissent now. And they're following the same course that they followed with other kind of publication. So I say that online censorship in Jordan should not be understood as the government's attempt to stifle speech online only, but rather a continuation of censorship mentality that before the internet was censored, books, movies, newspapers are continued to be censored because they said something, for example, against the monarchy, the regime, Gulf governments, insulting religion. So we have like these legislative sins of speech that we cannot really go beyond, or else will be censored anyways. It doesn't matter what kind of publication or medium that you're using. And it comes from this official custody over information. So it doesn't matter what kind of communication, but it's the feeling that the government is responsible for the kind of information that the users are either consuming or producing, whether online or on paper. So when we talk about censorship, it's not only the tools that the governments are using to block our websites, but it's also self-censorship, which is like the most effective form of censorship. It not only blocks access to information, but it also prevents people from producing some kind of information too. And it comes from surveillance. So I feel that surveillance, the discussion around surveillance is much more important than the discussion around tools of censorship, because usually surveillance is what leads to the most effective kind of censorship, which is self-censorship. But when you talk about censoring our website, it's been done so far, hopefully, through DNS filtering. And we've been having some kind of attempts to promote the circumvention of DNS filtering around our communities and our readers. And so it's been somehow successful. So you can circumvent DNS filtering, but you cannot circumvent self-censorship because of surveillance. I feel that whenever we talk about the export and import control kind of argument, it's a really debatable kind of issue on how effective and also export-import controls can be on the tool itself or on the government itself, because if like the export was limited, if the export of one censorship tool was limited to a government, but then there are many other tools that the government can use in order to stifle speech. And when it comes, especially when it comes to software companies that are based in the United States, I just don't see how the government of the United States is expected to put any kind of rules on export and import of these softwares or these programs if they're using it to to spy on their own people. So it feels a bit hypocritical to me to ask the US government to actually do that from them, not from like the civil society point of view. But I don't believe in the US government or the UK government being very genuine about limiting these controls if they did not do it in their own backyard. And this is still a very controversial issue, and it's very debatable, but this is my point of view on this topic.
Thank you, Reem. Now, we have to move on to the next session, I'm afraid, which is actually about the web in the Middle East, which I think will continue some of these issues. But what I would like to just say is that your point about self-censorship really links with the Ethiopian story to begin with, which is that if you are legitimately on social media, but if when you're in prison they say, well, what do you think your crime is? Because that is such an ambiguous question, in the end you think, well, your crime is saying anything at all that might be misinterpreted, and that self-censorship then starts really making people, as you say, all the work is done from then on in by the individual. There's so many things to follow through on this. Can I thank the speakers, and Reem, thank you for sitting in the traffic, and Jordan, I heard all the noise going on. Thank you very much to this group of speakers. That was absolutely fascinating preparation for the next session. Thank you.